Hi guys, I'm Melissa, and in today's video we'll be talking about a strategy called equation paths. And so similar to what we did in the previous video, an equation path is a puzzle. And so we can think of it as a puzzle, and by getting used to solving these equation path puzzles, it helps us learn a lot of math strategies that we can use when we solve equations or even word problems in the future for more complicated and advanced problems. And so in today's video, we're going to be talking about equation path puzzles. And so to give you guys a short description of what these puzzles are, in an equation puzzle, the goal is to trace a path through the grid to create a true equation. And we start in the top left corner and then end in the bottom right corner. We start in the top left corner and then we end with the bottom right number that's outside the box, outside the grid. And there are two important factors that we need to remember. And so the path can only go up, down, left, or right, so it cannot go diagonally. And also the path may not cross the same square twice. And so if we look at an example equation path puzzle, we start at the top left. So the top left corner starts with a 10, and then we want to end with 60, which is the number outside the grid. And so we'll solve the equation path puzzle. So first of all, we start from 10. And to get from 10 to 60, we know that we need to add 50. And so the path that we take must add up to 50. And then, since we know that 50 is a big number compared to the numbers that were given, like 3 and 2, we know that the path must cross 20 and 30 because 20 plus 30 equals 50. Now, since 20 plus 30 equals 50, we know that the other boxes that the equation path must pass through is, we should pass the numbers, or we should pass the boxes that eventually cancel themselves out. So what we mean by that is, for example, if we have plus 3 and negative 3, we learned this in the previous video, but if we have the same number 3, but one is a negative and one is a positive, we know that they add up to 0, and that's what we call canceling out. And so other boxes that we pass must cancel each other out so that at the end, everything else is canceled out except for 20 and 30. And so we get 20 plus 30 equals 50. And so we know that plus 3 and negative 3 cancel each other out. So we'll try going this way. And then if we go down, we pass 20. Then we go to the side, so we have 2. Then we add 30, and here we have a negative 2. So the previous 2 and this negative 2 cancels each other out. So if we take this path, 3 and negative 3 cancels each other out, and 2 and negative 2 cancels each other out. So we basically have 20 and 30 left only. So we have 10 plus 20 plus 30 equals 60. And so this would be our path. So now we'll solve some practice problems to make sure that we understand this concept completely. And so I'll start by going over the solution for problem 104. And so the number that we're starting with in the top left corner is 15, and we want to end with 28. So we'll subtract the initial number from the final number, and that gives us 13. So we know that the numbers that we go through in the path must add up to 13. And then right away I can see a path here. So I'll show you guys what the path would be here. So if we go this way, if we think of this as the path, then we add 1, and add 1. So 1 plus 1 plus 1 is 3. And then we add our 10. So 10 plus 3 equals 13, right? And so we got what we wanted. The path sum of all the numbers involved in the path is 13. And so eventually 15, the starting number, plus 13 equals 28, which is our final number. And so our path was like this. Now we'll look at problem 105. So the number we want to start with is 14, and we want to end with 70. So again, we're going to subtract the initial or the starting number from the final number. And that gives us 56. And so we know that the numbers that are involved in the path should equal to 56. Now all the numbers here are quite small, so we know that we must pass through numbers like 20 and 30 because they're big. So these big numbers are what's going to allow us to get to such a big sum, right? When we only have small numbers like 1, 2, then that tells us that we need large numbers like 20 and 30 to get us a sum of 56. So if we look here, to get to 20 and 30, we can definitely go like this. So there's a lot of possibilities that we can take, but considering that we pass all of these negatives, we know that 20 plus 30 is 50, and 50 plus any negative number is going to be less than 50. But the number that we want is 56, which is greater than 50, and so that tells us that we must utilize this 10. And then so if we pass through the 10 and go through 20 and 30 as well, we have 10 plus 20 plus 30, which is 60. And now 60 is greater than the number 56 that we want, so we need to subtract 4. And we have minus 4 right here, so we can just go like this. Now let's double check. 14 plus 10 plus 20 plus 30 minus 4 equals, so 10 plus 20 is 30, 30 plus 30 is 60, and 14 plus 60 is 74, 74 minus 4 is 4, so we get 70, right? And so the path was this. Now I'll solve problems 106 and 107, and then I'll be giving you guys time to solve other problems yourselves to make sure that you guys have understood how to solve this and you guys are comfortable solving these types of questions. But before we do that, we'll look at 106 together. So here the number that we start with is 100 and we end with 90. Now here the final number is smaller than the initial number, but still we're going to do final number minus initial number, and that gives us negative 10. And so what this tells us, even though it's a negative number, we're going to solve this equation path. We're going to solve this equation path puzzle just like what we did so far. So it's not any different. We're just going to do it just like what we've been doing so far. And so whatever numbers are involved in the path, they must add up to negative 10. And so we'll look for negative numbers like negative 5, negative 17, negative 31. So we know that some negative numbers have to be involved because what we want to get is negative 10. Well, from the path, the sum of all the numbers involved in the path must be negative 10. And so we can do this by crossing two negative 5s here. Since negative 5 plus negative 5, or negative 5 minus 5, is negative 10, which is the number that we want in the path. And so If we want to use these two negative 5s, then that means that again, every other number that's involved in the path must be cancelled out so that eventually we only have negative 5 and negative 5 that actually matters. So considering that, we want to cancel other numbers involved out, and we can see that this path can work because we have a plus 17, a minus 5, minus 17, plus 17, negative 5, negative 17, and negative 5 involved. And the 17 and negative 17, again, equal numbers, just opposite signs. One is positive, one is negative. They add up to 0, so they cancel out. And so eventually the only numbers we're left with is negative 5 and negative 5. So 100 minus 5 is 100 minus 10, which is 90. And so this was the correct path that we're going to take. Now I'll look at problem 107. So the starting number is 26, and we want to end with 32. Again, final number minus initial or starting number, and that is going to give us 6. So the numbers involved in the path must eventually add up to 6. Again, we see 3 and 3, so 3 plus 3 is 6, which is what we want in the path. So again, every other number involved in the path must cancel out so that eventually the only numbers that actually matter are these two 3s. And so if we take this path, negative 13 and 13 cancel out, and 25 and negative 25 cancel out. So the only numbers that matter are these two 3s. So 26 plus 3 is 26 plus 6, which is 32. Right? And so the correct path was this. Okay, so now I'll be giving you some time to try solving these problems yourselves before I go over the solution. And so I'll be giving you guys about 2 minutes to solve problem 108, and then I'll be going over the solution. And if you guys need more than 2 minutes, just feel free to pause the video and then come back to it. Okay, so now we'll go over the solution. So the number that we're going to start with is 40 in the top left corner. And then we want to end with 90. And so final number minus initial number is 50. And so the numbers that are involved in the path must equal to 50. Now again, since we have 50, we know that we need big numbers to be involved, like 10 and 40. And 10 plus 40 equals to 50. So assuming that we're going to use these two numbers, again, every other number involved in the path must cancel out because these two are the numbers that are the only numbers that should have an effect, because 10 plus 40 is already 50. And so if we take this path, we have 2, -8, 8, 10, -2, and 40. And so the 2 and -2 cancel out because they add up to 0. And then the 8 and -8 cancel out. So eventually we're left with 10 and 40 only. And so 40 plus 10 plus 40, or 40 plus 50, is 90. And so the correct path was this. I'll go over problem 109 with you guys because you guys just tried solving 108 on your own. And so the number we're starting with is 6, and we want to end with 0. So final minus initial is -6. So the numbers involved in the path must equal to -6. And so to get -6, we're going to look for combinations of, we're first going to look for combinations of two numbers that add up to -6, and we can see 2 and -8 can add up to -6, since 2 minus 8 is -6. Now, if we assume that these two numbers are going to be used, then every other number involved in the path, again, must cancel each other out, because 2 and -8 already satisfy the equation. And so if we look for a path in which all other numbers are going to be canceled out, we can use this path. And so we have 2, -8, 4, and -4 involved, and the 4 and -4 cancel each other out. So eventually we have 6 plus 2 minus 8 equals 0. And so this was the correct path. Now we'll take a look at problem 110. So again, I want you guys to try solving this problem on your own. So I'll be giving you guys 2 minutes again to solve this problem, and then I'll go over the solution after that. Okay, so we'll look at problem 110 right now. And so the number that we're starting with is 49, and we want to end with 50. So 50 minus 49 is 1. And so all the numbers in the path must end up to 1 eventually. And so we'll try looking for a path that adds up to 1. And this one might be a little tricky for you guys, since we don't have like two numbers that add up to 1 exactly and everything else cancels out. And so we're going to try to use a combination of numbers here. Now let's look at this path. So the numbers involved in the path, other than the starting number and initial number, is -10, 22, -1, and -10. And so we can rearrange this using what we learned in the previous video. -10 minus 10 plus 22 minus 1. And -10 minus 10 is -20. And so -20 plus 22 minus 1. And we know that -20 plus 22 is 2. And 2 minus 1 is 1. And so the correct path would be this. So this was a little tricky, but if you kind of worked with many numbers and many possibilities, I'm sure that you guys could have figured it out, maybe with more practice, more time. So if you did solve this problem, it was quite hard, so great job. And we'll look at problem 111 together. So here the starting number is 19, and we want to end with 17. And so for the path, we want a path that eventually adds up to -2. And so we want, for 111, this one is also a quite tricky one because we can't cancel anything out or use any two numbers only. And so we'll try to think of numbers that we can add and subtract to get -2. And so we would have to pass -6 in any scenario because like to get to 17 we have to pass the number in the bottom right corner. So -6 has to be used. So we'll indicate that. And then we can either take this path or this path, but both numbers are -6. So that tells us that, like, first of all, even if we go either way, we would have to use two -6 at the end. And so -6 minus 6 is already -12. And so the previous numbers in the path must equal to 10 because -12 plus 10 is what gives us -2. And if we look here, all the positive numbers, +2 plus 4 plus 2 plus 2, that gives us 10 because 2 plus 4 is 6, and 6 plus 2 is 8, and 8 plus 2 is 10. And so if we connect it like this, we get 10 from here, and then -6 gives us a 4, -6 is -2, and so 19 minus 2 is 17. And so this was the path that we want to take. Now we're on the last page, 112. All the problems in this page are trickier than what we've been doing so far. They all have a star next to them, but because we did solve a lot of practice problems before, I hope that you guys can solve all of these. Of course, if you can't or if it's a little tricky, that's totally fine. But with more practice, I'm sure that you guys will all be better at like doing these equation path problems. And I'm sure that at your schools or in your tests, you won't have exact problems that ask you to solve the equation path puzzle. But what this strategy helps us improve on and strengthen is the skill to like look at numbers that add up to what we want. So for example, like there can be questions like 13. Well, there can be questions like, oh, they give you like numbers, and then it gives you a starting number, and it tells you, oh, what number should we add and subtract to get to what the number we want. And then even though it's not set up in a puzzle, in all the grids and all that, you can still use the strategy of identifying what numbers work and what number combinations can work. So that is what equation paths help us prepare for. And so going back to problem 112, we start with 13, want to end with 26. So the path must equal to 13. And so, again, we must always go through -3 at the end. So we're going to consider that already. And then so that tells us that the sum of the previous boxes, I think this might be a little confusing for you guys, but since we already know that -3 must be involved, we're going to think of it in reverse order. So try to follow along. I know this might be a little tricky, but let's consider the square. The square is the sum of all other boxes in the path. And we have box minus 3, this equals 13, right? And so that tells us that box equals 13 plus 3, and so the box must equal to 16. And that tells us that, so not thinking of the -3, all other numbers involved in the path must equal to 16, so that when we come to the end and subtract 3, it gives us 13. And so looking at that, we want to try looking at this path. And so we have 3 7s involved in this path. So 7 plus 7 plus 7 equals 21. And then we have 21 minus 2 minus 3, which is 21 minus 5 is 16. Right, so the box, or sum of all other numbers, is 16. And we have 16 minus 3, which is 13. And so 13 plus the path, which is 13, is 26. And so this was the path that we should take. Now we'll look at problem 113. We start with 50 and want to end with 100. So the path must be equal to 50, or the numbers involved in the path must add up to 50. And so looking at the grids and the numbers that we have, we already have a 50 here, so you want to see if everything else can cancel out. And so this is basically like, you can't use tricks like canceling out and stuff. So basically you need to try out number combinations for this problem. So this might take quite some time because you need to try out different numbers and see which one works. But I think one strategy here is to notice that we already have number 50. So everything else must cancel out, or not cancel out because like numbers don't cancel out. So like all the other numbers must equal to 0. And so if we take this path, if you guys need more time, like if you guys want to try figuring out the combinations, feel free to pause the video, but I'll go over the solution and tell you why this path works. So the numbers involved is -7 plus 38 minus 37 plus 8 minus 2. So 50 is involved, but we already know that 50 is the number that we need to use. So we're just going to disregard the 50, and then we're going to look at the other numbers to see if they add up to 0. So -7 plus 38 is 31. And so we can rewrite this as 31 minus 37 plus 8 minus 2. And 31 minus 37 is -6. And 8 minus 2 is 6. So these two cancel out and eventually add up to 0. So that tells us that this path is basically 0 plus 50. So the number within the path is all equal to 50. And so basically we have starting number 50 plus 50 for the path equals final number 100. So this was the path that we want to take. Now I'll go over problem 114. I'll go over the solution so that you guys can check your work later after you're done solving. So again, if you need time before I go over the solution, just feel free to pause the video. We want to start with 100 and end with 114. And so 114 minus 100 is 14. So path must add up to 14. And so the correct path would be this way. And we'll see why this path works. So the numbers involved are 1, -30, 2, 1, -10, and 50. And so we'll look at large numbers first. So we have -30 minus 10 plus 50, which is -40 plus 50, and that is 10. And then looking at the small numbers, we have 1 plus 2 plus 1, which is 4. So the path is 10 plus 4 equals 14, and so 100 plus 14 from the path equals 114. Now we'll look at problem 115. We start with 25 and want to end with 34. 34 minus 25 is equal to 9. And so the numbers inside the path must equal to 9. And so here, right away, we can know that this is the correct path. It's a bit easier than what we've been doing like in this page because the numbers are smaller. And so it's easier to add up and subtract. So 7 minus 8 is -1, and -1 plus 1 cancels out. So basically these three numbers are equal to 0. And so we have 2 plus 3 plus 4, which is 5 plus 4 equals 9. So 25 plus 9 equals 34. Now we're going to look at problem 116. So we want to start with 26 and end with 28. So the path must equal to 2. Well, the path must add up to 2. And so here, what we're going to want to use is we're going to take this path, so we'll try and see if it works. So we have a plus 20 and negative 20, so they cancel out. So the numbers that are effective are 1 plus 2 minus 5 plus 4. 1 plus 2 is 3, and so 3 minus 5 is minus 2 plus 4 equals 2. Right, and so these numbers add up to 2. And so we have 26 plus 2 from the path equals 28. And so this was what we wanted. This was the pathway that we want to take. And then finally we have our last problem, 117. So the number that we're starting with is 100, and we want to end with 102. So basically, again, the path must add up to 2. Now this problem is a bit trickier because the numbers involved are now bigger. So we need to do so the calculations, I guess, are more harder. But I'm sure that we can all do this. So we're going to look for a path that adds up to 2, so that 100 plus 2 can be 102. And so since the number that we want from the path, which is 2, is a small sum, we want to look for numbers that are quite similar so that it gives us a small difference of 2 only. And so we want to try taking this path. So we have negative 20 plus 41 plus 21 minus 40. So we're going to rearrange this to try to group similar numbers together. And so we have negative 20 plus 21 plus 41 minus 40. Negative 20 plus 21 is 1. 41 minus 40 is 1. So 1 plus 1 is 2. And 100 plus 2 equals 102. So this path was what we need to take. Now that is the end of today's lesson. If you guys have any questions, again, just feel free to email me. And here's my email address, melissakim555@gmail.com. And if you guys have any questions, just let me know, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Thank you.